Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the plenary session, CHI 2017.
This week, we peer through the lens of Ben Shneiderman's camera to illuminate the human-human interactions that make the CHI community vital. Today, be bold. At CHI 1992 in Monterey, California, Ben Shneiderman, Susan Brennan, and Brenda Laurel staged a public debate moderated by Abby Dawn on anthropomorphism. While the avatars have changed, the core questions remain. What kinds of interfaces are best, and what role should interfaces play? Anthropomorphic or not? Direct manipulation or interface agents? But what jumps out about the photograph is the stance it takes toward those debates. Even though the stakes are high for scholarship and practice, the photograph is more comedy than tragedy. It is clearly staged. I suspect that Brenda Laurel, who's missing here, actually took the picture, and the smiles are broad. It suggests a bold attitude toward different ideas, one predicated on engagement and, well, here's Abby Dawn.
I think a little controversy and a little friendly, trying to think of the right word. Not genuine fighting, right? But friendly sparring, right? A kind of intellectual sparring.
Genuine intellectual sparring is only one mode of interaction at CHI conferences, but it's a good way to describe an overarching attitude toward working through ideas that are new and challenging. In the time I've spent working on this project, it's been hard to miss the prevailing let's do it approach. Even when opinions differ, there is a refreshing openness to getting ideas on the proverbial table, or on the floor, like Michael Muller.
It was a bunch of people. I was not in any way appointed to be their leader. I was not, I just wanted to help them to get where they wanted to go.
Boldness can take many forms, but the particular strain of boldness that is so often on display in these pictures is the boldness to say something revolutionary, and also the openness to hear something revolutionary, to listen to where they want to go, and help them get a bit further, to change existing technologies and people's lives. Tomorrow, be interactive.
Thank you very much. You've just seen the first video in the SIGCHI sponsored Be Bold, Interactive, Generous, or Be Big series developed with Ben Shneiderman by media studies scholar Scott Kushner. Scott, where are you? Wherever the heck you are, Scott. There you are. Stand up. Please notice this guy and talk to him after the session. He's gathering our stories to reflect on our community as a genuine scientific community that's doing cool things. This is a beginning. So please visit the site as well and connect with Scott to engage further. And now the official, good morning. Thank you so much for coming, and for those of you bold enough to sing Rocky Mountain High with me, that was very good. I feel so much better too. And for those of you joining us on the live streaming YouTube channel, thank you. You can tune in. Well, I'm not going to tell you how because you're here, and those who are watching obviously have, so forgive me for that. But I would like to tell you that everybody, we're going to have a very tight schedule this morning, so we might not be able to take questions. So please join us on slido.com in the hashtag CHI 2017 room for plenary, and you'll be able to share observations, comments, questions as we roll through this, and we'll be able to give this to all the presenters afterwards. And now to the matter itself. Oh, excuse me, one more thing. Don't be shy. Everybody with me. Don't be shy. Say hi at CHI. Yes. Thank you. Okay. Remember to do that frequently today, and you'll feel so much better, and so will the people around you. All right. Because CHI is a little crazy. Gloria Mark initiated the CHI Stories series this year to highlight our individual engagement with CHI and our experiences with HCI. Very much inspired by that theme, we're here to tell a magnificent and inspiring story about CHI itself, as led by, as you've just seen, Ben Shneiderman, a pioneer, leader, and advocate of HCI research and design and its application. However, to tell this story of HCI's role in changing the world for good, Ben has asked other field leaders, including, whom you'll see this morning and hear from, Elizabeth Churchill, Terry Winograd, Matt Jones, Jonathan Lazar, Judy Olson, Gary Olson, Catherine Plaisant, Jenny Preece, all these folks here to reflect on the stories of Chi's importance, its fantastic impact shaping our world, and to consider the challenges and the opportunities in HCI moving forward. So to take us through this multifaceted narrative of Chi, the first part of the presentation will be led by this host of HCI ministers to lead us on our stories of goodness so far. This will be followed by Ben, also known as Leonardo da Vinci Shneiderman, to take us forward into the future of what our opportunities and obligations are to celebrate HCI in the coming millennia. Thank you very much, and to kick off this morning, Elizabeth Churchill.
Good morning, everybody. I'm on a podium I don't need. Okay, here we go. I'm here representing myself and Terry Winograd, who couldn't be here, unfortunately. So I guess I go forward. Here we go. Want to really talk about the way in which HCI has sort of become part of the design world, and how HCI is embedded within design, not just of technologies, but also of systems and of, for example, management systems. Ben's first use of the term designing came out in 1987, when design became a verb. And this is the book in its first incarnation, Designing the User Interface, and it has come out in many, 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 many different editions. This is just a few of them. So this designing verb has been with us for a while, having impact. Some of our other luminaries, Don Norman, went from talking about the psychology of everyday things to the design of everyday things in this very famous book that first came out in 1988. We've also been bringing design in an HCI human-centered lens to software, Terry's own book here, and also to thinking about system development. So this human-centered notion and nature of HCI in design is being applied across the board. We've also broadened to interaction design and to designing interactions, and you'll be hearing from Jenny a little later, but this is the book of many editions from Jenny Preece, Yvonne Rogers, and Helen Sharp. And of course, we've also gone further out to sort of thinking about field design, and a topic very close to Ben's heart, values. So HCI and values, very much part of our community's contribution. We are also embedded within the business world, thinking about the human-centered nature of business and design thinking. So a lot of ideas from HCI and the HCI community turn up in these kinds of texts, including designing your life. And I think the message that we all want to take away is that we've had a major impact in thinking about us all as designers and this very human-centered process of iterating, prototyping, reflecting, and sharing ideas, and then going back to prototyping and iterating again. And if we have a look at the interface on the left here, this is what used to count as an interface. And that's an image which was the beginning of what we now think of as the GUI and graphical user interfaces. So for a long time, we've been having an effect in that way. And I think many of you are going to recognize this object, the objects that we carry, and a lot of the HCI principles that are embedded within these mobile devices. And if you look at the Apple guidelines, you will see a lot of elements there that we teach in our HCI courses, which are recommended to designers and developers of Apple. And some of those things you'll recognize, like direct manipulation, slide to unlock. Catherine Plaisant and Ben studied this in the early 90s. And I think every day you use one of these, you should think about some of their early work on the toggles and the sliders. Beautiful work. And there's videos up for you to look at. Google also took principles from HCI in terms of simplicity, as you'll see here, but also in terms of latency, making sure that things happened in the right time frame. And you'll be hearing from Judy soon, but Larry Page attributes Judy to his belief that HCI and designing for humans is essential. In my own world, I've been looking at material design, which is a design spec and framework for Google, and within that you will see many HCI principles embedded also. We're going into a bold new world of many, many, many kinds of interfaces. And more than ever, our humanity and the humanity of those for whom we are designing is at the fore, all the way through to bodies and interactions and brains. And before I close, I just want to say that HCI has had a major impact in other ways also. And sort of going from designing to where we are now, many Turing Award winners have come from the HCI community. This is just a few of them. We missed Fred Brooks, as Ben pointed out, and we should have had him here, and apologize for that. But anyway, we are having influence through many, many, many different channels, so please, let's continue.
I go a long way back with Ben. We first met in 1982 when we were both speakers at a special seminar at the New York University Business School. I was at Bell Labs at the time, and of course Ben was at Maryland. We offered business and academic perspectives on HCI, and that was 35 years ago.
I probably met Ben initially around the same time. We all three were at the initial Gaithersburg meeting that preceded by a year the first CHI conference. It has been fun mutually watching the field of HCI develop over the decades. We will look here at an important subfield of HCI, Computer-Supported Cooperative Work, or CSCW. Judy and I first began working in this area in the mid-1980s, when we teamed up with researchers at Michigan and Carnegie Mellon on the NSF Express project. And this started back when we looked like this. We've been studying long-distance collaboration ever since.
Research on collaboration using technology has been a mainstay of CSCW and CHI over these many years. The technology has changed and has become more widespread and familiar. For instance, we built a research prototype of a collaborative editor called Shredit, or Shared Editor, in 1989 and carried out a number of studies of its use. Today, software like Google Docs has much the same functionality, but is very widely distributed to support all forms of collaboration.
Another example is video conferencing. In the early days of CSCW, there were many studies of early versions of such conferencing, many that were experimental prototypes. Today we take tools like Skype and Google Hangout for granted, as ways of keeping in touch not just with coworkers, but with family and friends.
However, though we have many tools to use to support distance collaboration, many of the issues that we've studied over the years remain. While there are technical issues, for example, the 7 minutes of hell in getting video conferencing to work, the major issues are social. What's the right way to use the technologies effectively? What are matters like trust, or time zones, or differences in group members' cultures? And how best to manage distance collaboration has emerged as one of the most important areas needing attention.
We have learned a lot, but not everyone knows the lessons that have been learned. That's why many forms of support have emerged. For instance, the science of team science has arisen to formulate principles for effective scientific collaboration. Funding agencies like NIH and NSF are giving more attention to how scientific teams will carry out their collaborations. Tools such as our own Collaboration Success Wizard were developed to assess groups and provide feedback to help them be more effective. And of course, Ben's new book, The ABCs of Research, Achieving Breakthrough Collaborations, carries this message even further.
And new opportunities have emerged. Telepresence robots are being used in medicine, business, and education to give remote participants a richer experience. They also provide effective access to remote resources, such as specialized medical expertise. Our own son used a robot to give a remote software developer, who was very valuable to his company, presence.
So we are delighted to see Ben himself giving more attention to the importance of collaboration in his most recent book about research. We agree that this is a key area for CSCW and HCI research, one that holds the promise not just of deeper understanding, but more effective collaborations. And as we know, most of the important problems in our society these days require collaborative efforts. We have a moral imperative to help make these work well.
Good morning. Ben Shneiderman, in his landmark 2000 article on universal usability, challenged us as an HCI community to use HCI research to empower every citizen, inspired many people, myself included, to get involved in the topic of universal usability. Ben also took a leadership role in organizing the 2000 and 2003 conferences on universal usability. And in fact, when you see what's been talked about and what Ben's going to talk about being bold and interactive and generous, this was a slide from the 2000 Universal Usability Conference where it says passion, courage, creativity. And these are all themes that Ben has been inspiring us with for many years. In that landmark 2000 article in Communications of the ACM, Ben described 3 pillars of universal usability: technology variety, user diversity, and gaps in user knowledge. And Matt Jones and I are going to give examples today of user diversity. So let's talk about some of the successes that we've had in the HCI community in terms of user diversity. One of the greatest successes is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. These were guidelines that originated in the HCI community, worked on by many HCI researchers, right? And the first version of WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, was approved in 1999, version 1.0. The new version came out in 2008, and that's version 2.0. It is the global standard for accessibility. There are guidelines about how to apply these guidelines to non-web technologies. Every government around the world that has a law that protects the rights of people with disabilities to access information cites the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. They are a global standard, and we have impacted the entire planet with these guidelines. We have many other successes to celebrate. Originally, touchscreens were not accessible for blind users. But there are people who are in this room, in fact, today, who came up with the strategies that blind users could use to interact with touchscreens. And then those techniques were rolled out into all of our major smartphones with touchscreens, our tablet devices, right? There are many examples where, as an HCI community, we have impacted the world. We have been bold. We have been interactive. We have been generous, and we will continue to do so. Voting used to be inaccessible. But due to many of the advances that we created in the HCI community, if you're blind, if you're deaf or hard of hearing, if you're low vision, if you have limited use of hands, right? If you have low literacy, if you are a user who can't vote in person but needs to vote remotely, for instance, military voters, there are many options for you to vote. We made this possible in the HCI community. We need to celebrate our successes, and we need to challenge ourselves to do more, to keep getting involved, to keep relating our research to practice, to keep implementing solutions in the real world. And our community continues to work on new input and output methods for people with disabilities. So we need to take up Ben's challenges. Ben has inspired many of us and continues to inspire many of us. We need to take up his challenges to go out there and make a difference in the world.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. And here's a slide with a picture of 2 people who've had a profound impact on my perspective of human-computer interaction. Ben, of course, and the late Gary Marsden from the University of Cape Town in South Africa. And you're seeing a picture here from another plenary session from a few KAIs ago. And Ben is introducing Gary as Gary's about to give his award talk, the Social Impact Award. And Gary was given that award for his leadership in terms of encouraging many of us to be shaped and changed by a positive, creative engagement with emerging markets, with developing regions. Now, people from developing regions, of course, have resource constraints that many of us, traditional users, don't have. Those constraints might be in terms of literacy, they might be in terms of education and access to computing resources. But over the last decade or so, we've been changed, we've been shaped by being open and being engaged with communities around the world. And over that last 10 years, we've seen some really exciting new methods, new solutions, new technologies. Here's some of Gary's work with his team, which was looking at how you can give content creation and sharing when there isn't an internet connection. And of course, there have been lots of other examples. This is a more recent one from Microsoft Research in India. You know, we've come a long way in terms of universal usability, but I want you to listen very carefully, because the most important thing that I can say is we've only just started, and the best is yet to come. So be encouraged and get engaged. Thank you.
All right, the last set. So I'm Catherine Plaisant. Oops, where is the button? Somebody left with the button. Ah, no, voilà. So long-term collaborator of Ben Shneiderman.
And I'm Jenny Preece, another long-term collaborator of Ben's, and also his wife.
We continue the story of tracing design, or today's design, to early inventions from the Kai community, with example from...
So here you can see a piece of text that's taken from Wikipedia, very general. You can see embedded links. We take these links for granted. It's part of everyday life. Have you ever wondered where the links come from that we click on the web? Well, here's an early screen of embedded links that was created by Ben and his colleagues at the University of Maryland. Tim Berners-Lee saw the screen and later used the concept of embedded links in the World Wide Web, something we use, all of us, probably every day.
Right, keep going.
Yeah. And this, I'm sure you've all got these around. I remembered to switch mine off. Here you see people, they're citizen scientists, they're out using their phones to take pictures, to send messages, and to communicate with each other. The concept of a small screen that we use very frequently every day is designed by many people in this community. Huge number of people have been involved in touchscreen design and the design of the tiny screens that we use every day. Here's one of the early screens, and again, it was designed in Ben's lab with his students in 1991.
Here is another example, the database search. Maybe you use something like this to look for an hotel in Denver, and every dot is an hotel, and maybe you use the sliders on the left to narrow your search, or maybe click on a button to say you wanted free internet. That reminds me of the home finder of 1992. We demonstrated the principles of dynamic queries. The map of Washington, there is dots for houses, sliders to reduce the price, or buttons to pick if you wanted a garage. So next time you shop for a tent at REI, or boots at Zappos, or lamps on eBay, say thank you to the Kai community. But wait, there is also those little numbers here, you see, that tells you there is lots of stuff and you better narrow it down. That reminds me of faceted search, a paper from 2003 from Marty Earth and her team at Berkeley. And they introduced the idea of combining the search box with all those controls for all the facets in the data and those little numbers that tell you what's available. That reminds me also of Query Preview from 1996, where we helped scientists search the NASA data sets, and they could click on areas of the world or on topics and see the number of data set reduced with those little numbers and bars. So you have to remember that before all that worked, all those people and more, the only way you could search was with query language or with form fill-ins, and you either had nothing or too much stuff. We were searching in the dark. So maybe next time you see a screen like this, think of kind of giving a big virtual hug to the Kai community. Next.
And here's a happy gang from the Kai community. Remember photo tagging? We all use photo tagging probably every day. But where did photo tagging come from? Here's another example of photo tagging. This time, it's from Penguin Watch by the Zooniverse group. The orange circles represent mature penguins. The green circles represent juveniles, and the yellow circles represent eggs. So photo tagging has evolved in many ways and for many purposes. But where did it come from? Here's an early screen, again, of a happy gang skiing. And it dates back to 2002. It comes from Ben's lab. As many of you know, Ben loves to take pictures. And he has a huge number of pictures on his laptop. So early on, Ben wanted to find some way of classifying his pictures. If you've got 35,000 family pictures and about the same number of professional pictures, you have to have a way of organizing them. So Ben and his students developed the Photo Finder, and this is an early screen of the Photo Finder showing tagging with names and also with comments.
Those are just a few examples. There are many, many, many more. And in fact, we will invite you to track and document the influence our field has had and continue to have. And that's it. Thank you.
Hello. I'm Anna Shneiderman, and I have the honor of introducing my dad, Ben Shneiderman. I've watched the Chi community from a daughter's perspective, and while my career has taken a different path into arts and education, I've been deeply inspired by my father's work. The thing that is so bold about his particular brand of Chi is that it is based on his strong belief in human agency to create a better world. I inherited from my dad the value that one's daily work must serve a positive social purpose, and that human beings have both the ability and the duty to shape our future for the better. I think he inherited his optimism and his belief in progress from his mother, my grandmother, who always used to say, even on her hardest days, tomorrow will be another day. Dad, tomorrow will be better because of your work in and with this community. So now I'm pleased to present to you my dad, Ben Shneiderman.
Where's the clicker? Thank you. All right, thank you. That was really wonderful. I should probably stop right now. I can't think I'd top that. But I thank you, Anna, and thank you, MC Schraefel, for putting this together. And thank you to my dear colleagues, and Jenny and Catherine especially, for introducing this section. Thank you also to Gloria and Susan for inviting me to make this presentation, putting your trust into me for doing this. And thank you especially to Gloria for the idea of Chi Stories. Come tonight from 6 to 8 p.m. to hear the Chi Stories of 12 people from this community. And I wanted to tell the story of this community. I think what's going on here is terrific. And I wanted to make that clear to you and to people beyond this audience as well. So I chose the title, How the Chi Community Got Its Groove and Saved the World. Getting one's groove, finding a groove, feeling groovy are very 1970s ideas, and that's when all this began. So that was sort of a look back at that time, and this talk is shaped around a set of stories. So it begins with my way of telling the story of this community, which began with, as already mentioned, software psychology, published in 1980, telling the story of the marriage of these disciplines. But only 2 short chapters were about user interface design, because it was such a new field. By 1986-87, designing the user interface was possible, a book to tell the story of the emerging research dimension and the growing potential for an industry. 6 years later, the 2nd edition, the 3rd edition, the 4th edition, the 5th edition, and last year, the 6th edition that required 6 co-authors to tell the story of all the work that's going on. Now, these books were snapshots at the time telling what was going on, telling about the frontiers of research, the successes of research, and the growing industry of user experience design. We had a rich heritage of those twin sources, and that is the first question. How did we create the HCI as a discipline, an academic discipline, and user experience design as an industry? Of course, these have a lot of overlaps, productive overlaps, and in fact, that is the secret of our success. We had an academic perspective, and we built real things. We influenced real products, and we learned a lot from that. So, let me tell you about how this happened, the origin story of Chi. Let me take you back when there was nothing. Put your feet on the floor, close your eyes, relax, take a deep breath, and here is our beginning. And so began the dawn of the discipline of HCI and the industry of user experience design. It was a difficult time, but this community was guided by three powerful ideas. We believed in diversity of users. We wanted to include everyone, the novices and the experts, the young and the old, users with disabilities, users with low literacy, users who spoke different languages, many, many people. And by working to make good designs for everyone, we raised the quality for everyone. That's one of our important secrets. And we provided the market pull for Moore's Law. It's a bold statement, but Moore's Law would only have happened if we had kept going and provided the large market. Now, I know this because in 1993, the board of directors of Intel Corporation invited me to Santa Clara to talk to them, including Gordon Moore. What's that? Oh, dear. Okay, so in 1993, I went to Santa Clara to talk to Gordon Moore and the board, and their question for me was, what applications will create the need for high performance and low cost chips? Supercomputing was clearly an application, graphics was an application, but they didn't see that was enough to invest the billions of dollars that would be needed. And I spent a long time planning that, and I told them three things. I said music, photos, and videos. Now in 1993, getting music out of a computer was a pretty angular thing. It didn't go too well. Photos were blurry, if you could get them at all. Okay? Videos, kind of a dream. You needed a video disc. And they listened and they thought, yeah, we could see how those would eat a lot of cycles and those would be necessary. And they said, yeah, downloading Hollywood videos would require high performance chips. So I said, no, wait a minute. It wasn't the downloading of Hollywood videos, it was the uploading of 1 billion videos created by so many people. And it took a decade or two to make that happen. The chips had to get better and cheaper, and our designs had to get better. But the content sharing sites that we built, that the technologies and the concepts framed in this community are what helped create the market pull for Moore's Law. Secondly, we believed in diverse applications. We wanted to do legal and medical. We wanted to do control rooms for factories and cockpits for aircraft. We wanted to do business applications and personal applications. We wanted to do education and entertainment. And once again, that broad view made everything better because we could try the ideas out in many different situations. And I think the best work in this community are by those who took on real problems, with real users and real data. We got into the wild. We went to where the users were. We studied them where they worked and where they played and learned how they did their jobs and worked to make it better. We also had a profusion of interface ideas and theories. We had ubiquitous and we had embedded. We had invisible yet tangible, Hiroshi. We had ambient and immersive. We had virtual and we had augmented. And then we got getting started, we went social. And we had affective and empathic and persuasive, and one after another, these ideas nourished each other and grew together. So I celebrate the diversity of ideas and the diversity of community. That's very powerful. And where did we learn this idea of diversity? I think we got it from our parents. Computer science and psychology, and from our aunts and uncles of human factors, industrial engineering, and many other disciplines. And yet the marriage of these disciplines produced the fraternal twins of human-computer interaction and user experience design. And as these fraternal twins grew, they became very powerful and strong. And now, this metaphoric story is a good way to begin, but let me take you on to a little more concreteness. As I studied and wrote about the idea of the paradigm birth of HCI, okay? That it wasn't a paradigm shift, as Thomas Kuhn described in The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, but we were a true birth. We were something new. We were new because there was a new opportunity. The technologies that were growing brought the need for something new, and we lived up to that. And we began with something very simple: one researcher doing a project, writing a paper, giving a presentation at a conference, at a university, at a corporate site. 35 years ago, there were less than 100 papers on HCI. Now there are, how many papers? 12,000 papers a year just in HCI, 2 orders of magnitude. And as we go forward, we're going to think about how do we get 2 orders of magnitude beyond that in 35 years. Are we going to get to 1 million papers a year? Think about that. Okay, so the research projects grow into labs, the labs become institutes, the articles generate the need for review articles, the books and textbooks follow, and the presentations lead to workshops and the conferences that began to grow. SIGCHI is one of those wonderful places. Not only are there 3,000 people here every year at our main big conference, but there are 20, 30, 35 conferences, specialized conferences, at the same time. And that's a remarkable richness of this discipline, that we can support both a central conference with 19 parallel sessions and 2,000 forms of presentation and participation, as well as these 35 specialized conferences. And then book series began to follow. Journals got better and stronger. Magazines came along. Training courses in industry. University curricula. The HCI, the CHI community, in 1991 published a guide for curriculum in the CHI community. And programs began to form at universities to teach this. And places went from 1 faculty member to 3 to 5 in growing numbers. The degrees came along. Departments and iSchools began to form, where HCI was valued, it was central to their success stories. Whole colleges of computing and information science, human-centered design, and so on began to form. The conference committees got stronger and bigger and more prestigious, as did the journal editorial boards. Professional societies were formed to serve this community. At the same time, we're dealing with the turbulence of ideas in this field. We started with the traditional psychological controlled experiments in laboratory conditions. It was very appropriate for the pointing times at a mouse or clicking or other tasks. But even at the beginning, qualitative methods were part of the CHI community. We believed in ethnographic observation, of interviews, of surveys, of case studies. we were a strong part of validating these principles and making them accepted to wide sets of communities. We also developed the notion of usability testing that's matured into the A/B testing so widely used in industry. And I'm sure there are other research methods that will flow from this community. Further along, we had to struggle with the turbulence of terminology harmony, a phrase I've used to describe the battles that raged over, should we use the word users? Many people thought that was not good. Users were druggies. They were still in the feeling groovy stage of thinking. And so that was true. That was what people argued. We should say operators, which seemed a bit clunky. Others didn't like the word windows. It wasn't an accurate metaphor, some suggested, and yet we began to converge on that. Other fields failed to converge, and they did not produce the successes that we did. Reference merging was another important aspect. The early papers had very little overlap in the references. They referenced different sources of work. And as we grew, we came to recognize the common ground of what was important to all of us, and we began to celebrate certain kinds of work and certain papers and certain people. Certain individuals became celebrated leaders because they represented a way of thinking that was valued by all of us. Okay? The guidelines documents were nicely described by Jonathan and Elizabeth. It's just a thrill to me that the early work in this community, Sid Smith and Jane Mosier, 500 guidelines, were an influence on the Microsoft and the Apple user interface guidelines. On the slide that Elizabeth showed, there it said direct manipulation, you know? It's kind of a thrill to see that the phrases that some of us started with wind up still being in those interface guidelines 35 years later and being profoundly influential, not just in the guidelines, but also international standards and the way one company after another has taken on the ideas that grew in this community. They don't always say thank you, but we know that the work went from here to there. We can trace it and see. Principles grew strong, and again, theories became important. We began to gain influence in our academic and industrial circles. We became integrated into the workforce and integrated into academic circles, and we also began to transform them. Yes, this was imperfect. All of us have stories about struggles and making this kind of thinking accepted. But we are getting there, and every day I am seeing positive stories about how the work in this community has transferred out and had this huge impact. Finally, the products, companies, and the industries. Our champion sponsors here. Look at that list. Bloomberg and Google and IBM and Microsoft and Yahoo and who am I leaving? Facebook. All of those are leading companies, some of the biggest companies in the world. They are here because they want to learn from our ideas, and they want to hire our students and each of us. That's very powerful. That set of champion sponsors is enormously high impact, and we should be appreciative that they are here, and we should appreciate them, but it's pretty powerful validation of our importance. Conferences matured with Best Paper Honors and Test of Time Awards and Academy Fellows. And then even early on, there were grants from government agencies who understood this was an important topic, and those solidified into larger funding programs. So this is the story of how we got here. And the second question is, outside our community, how do we convey the remarkable impact of our discipline? That's really been a challenge. And I began to look around how other disciplines and fellow and similar fields tried to do it. So it goes back to a famous diagram in the 1995 report, often called, from the National Research Council, often called the Brooks-Sutherland report. And as Elizabeth's slide said, Fred Brooks and Ivan Sutherland, people from our community. And I was kind of pleased because I could see on this slide that time sharing and workstations And windows were a key part of that technology success. The top straight lines in each of these tire tracks show academic research, the middle line is industry research, and then you have the dotted lines of products emerging, and then billion-dollar industries. Now, this became very influential in policy circles in Washington and other leading centers in the world. This idea caught on, and Brad Myers did a nice job of telling the story of direct manipulation, the mouse, Windows, text editing, hypertext, and gesture recognition. He used green lines to show university research, purple lines to show industry research, and then the red lines were the commercial products that flowed. So that was good. 2003 report from the National Research Council expanded on this. And still, we were part of the story of graphical user interfaces, the World Wide Web, speech recognition. These were things that we contributed to, and this is kind of a richer story. By 2012, the revised version from the National Research Council made me angry. Because, although it tells a story of computer architectures and distributed systems and databases, somehow HCI got hidden. We weren't visible, and I was angry because I know that we had a powerful influence, and others have told me they were angry too. In the last couple of years, I've been trying to think of how to tell our story. So here's my way of telling the history in my tire tracks diagram for HCI and user experience design. We started with early ideas on the bottom of hypertext, direct manipulation, teleconferencing, and the ideas in this community grew out to the mature trillion-dollar fields of e-commerce, mobile devices, social web, web search, and so on. We did that. That was us. Now, there's lots of other technologies that are important too, but if they were going to push HCI aside, I was going to push HCI forward, and I hope you'll use this diagram to tell the story. And there may be other ways to tell the story, and I'm going to invite you to do that in a moment. So the third question is, where do we go from here? Okay? And the line that I often use, the best is yet to come, is still with me here. The paradigm birth model may give you some clues. If you were going to add ovals, what would you add for the next 35 years? I've got a few. We've got to resolve some differences within our community about directions. There are controversies still. Come to our panel at 11:30 this morning about human-computer integration versus powerful tools. I think you'll know which side I'm on, and I think that will be a lively debate. We might want to consider developing certification for user experience designers. We might want to do more about our history. I'm so pleased that Scott Kushner helped begin that process and that Gloria and Susan supported it, as did the SIGCHI EC, who funded that project. Take a look at the 3 videos. They're all on the web now. So we have to tell our story better, both our history and our impact. And then, if I were to think forward a few years, maybe in the United States and at other countries around the world, we need a cabinet-level position for a Department of User Experience. It's kind of a bold idea, but why not? Why not? We have a Department of Interior and Commerce. User experience is arguably one of the most powerful economic forces, and therefore it needs to be represented at a national level. Companies might have chief user experience officers or chief design officers, as Johnny Ives is at Apple. And maybe the United Nations should form an international user experience agency. After all, 65 years ago, when they formed the International Atomic Energy Agency, that was the powerful and most dangerous technology. And in a way, social media has great dangers and challenges, but great opportunities as well. You may find other button circles to add or ovals to add, so take your hand at that one. I also invite you to create your own tire tracks diagram, which starts at maybe 2000 and goes up to the year 2050. Think ahead 35 years. What's on that chart? Here's my try. I think participation, sustainability, healthcare, persuasion are important, and they will each lead to trillion-dollar industries. And just, call it out. What would you add? There's a lot of things to be added. What would you add to this? Internet of Things, maybe. 3D printing, what else? All right, I'll leave you to do it at your time. I've tried to tell the story in the recent book, The New ABCs of Research, and the ABCs really come from what this community did. We had an academic discipline and we had an industry. Okay? Working together is what produces the dual successes, the fraternal twins. In the book, I called it Applied and Basic Combined, ABC. And also ABC for Achieving Breakthrough Collaborations, and other ABCs as well. And so I close with a takeaway message. Think about our history, about the way we did it, and how we can teach that to others, other disciplines. What's our history? What's our impact? How do we document? How do we verify it? Okay? But, as has already been said, the best is yet to come. And I believe in this community. As Jonathan's slide said, I still believe that this community has the passion, the courage, and the creativity, and the devotion to inclusiveness, which will lead to positive outcomes. I believe that this community understands that well-designed experiences empower individuals, build strong families, enable thriving communities. And those are really powerful ideas. We're devoted to important areas, healthcare, economic development, and even peace itself. These are noble and bold goals, but they will drive us forward. Keep your eye on them. As one of our community members, Alan Kay, so thoughtfully said, the best way to predict the future is to invent it yourself. And that's what we're going to do. So let's get on with it. There's a lot to be done. Go Chi. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Kisses to you all. Thank you. Thank you. Let's do it.